Tēnā koutou katoa. Very nice to see you here this evening. We tried to force you, unlike students who always sit at the very back of the room, we tried to force you to sit at the front because we all know how frustrating it is when you have the audience at the back. So as indicated, I'm the provost of Lincoln University. The Vice Chancellor gives his apologies. He's actually on annual over the next few weeks. So Grant would love to have been here, Wayne. He has always enjoyed the talks that you give. He speaks to the oration that you provide. And I think the last one that was blue and gold, which was fantastic, a really nice message. So we look forward to this talk this evening. This is a very important discussion, as you'd appreciate. Securing a skilled and sustainable workforce in New Zealand's primary industries is core to our business, but also core to the success of New Zealand's economy. The primary industries are not only the backbone of our economy, they're also at the heart of our identity as a nation. Yet we're facing a pivotal moment. Labor shortages, shifting demographics, technological change, and policy pressures are converging, placing real strain on our rural communities and agribusinesses. Today, we gather to reflect on these challenges, but more importantly, to explore opportunities. How we attract, train, and retain the talent our sector so desperately needs to thrive into the future. We're especially pleased to welcome Wayne Langford, National President of Federated Farmers, our keynote speaker tonight. Wayne brings not only deep insight into the pressures facing our farmers today, but also an inspiring leadership and practical thinking on how we can build more. Before we hear from Wayne, I'd like to take a few minutes to just share some of the activities here at Lincoln University in terms of contribution in this space. As you'd appreciate, Lincoln University is a specialist land-based university. It is New Zealand's crown, not just a jewel in the crown, but a crown of provision into one of the most important sectors for New Zealand, and a sector that is planned on growing quite significantly. Our world-class research is core to our business, disseminating that knowledge, both directly with our partners in the sectors, but also through our students is critical. No matter what degree at Lincoln, the exposure to land-based context means that a large proportion of our graduates end up in bioeconomy, including the production sectors of agriculture, horticulture, research, science and technology, national and local government, and local industries such as tourism, parks, sports, and recreation. The significance of contextual and experiential learning that so many of our students have makes our graduates highly employable. 82% of the graduates that enter the workforce are employed fully within 6 months of leaving Lincoln. That means that we have both listened to, understood, and are delivering to the workforce sector. And I believe that that is absolutely critical for how the university sector, but equally the tertiary sector, should be engaging with our industry. It's my pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker, Wayne Langford. Wayne's a 6th-generation dairy farmer from Golden Bay, with the current national president of Federated Farmers. Many of you know him for his tireless advocacy on behalf of rural communities, especially on issues like labor shortages, regulatory complexity, and on-farm costs. He's also the co-founder of Meet the Need, a farmer-led charity that's delivered millions of meals to food banks across New Zealand, an incredible contribution to our society. Through his YOLO Farmer Initiative, Wayne has brought much-needed visibility to mental health and well-being in the rural sector. He's a passionate, solutions-focused leader, and we're delighted to have him here today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. It is really good to be here, and it's a great day when Carol works out for leadership. It's been a very busy day. This morning, meeting with Minister Macleay and Minister Watts going over our emissions targets. It was quite a healthy and healthy discussion. Yeah, heated and healthy discussion, you could say. Yeah, I don't know whether you'd be glad it's going on, but we didn't come to a resolution just yet. So still got some work to do there. A great introduction of Lincoln, and it's really cool to see the manner of Lincoln being lifted to what it is and what it should be. That too often in New Zealand, we're humble Kiwis, and we don't do that well. And so it's great to have so much pride in the university, and particularly the university that I was a part of and studied at and being a white coat as well. So a great place to be. Really interesting that I'm going to get into this topic. It's one that's a bit outside of my general day-to-day work stream, but something that, as you can imagine, I had to advocate for quite often. So I do want to kind of preempt this discussion by saying I really do want some kind of feedback on this and feedback from you all around what we should be advocating for, who we should be advocating, and what could get best results, because obviously we're going through a lot of reviews, a lot of decisions being made, and so would be really helpful there. So I'll run through a few slides anyway. I've got a few, and then we'll have a bit of a discussion after that, I think, and we'll go from there. As mentioned, dairy farmer up in Golden Bay. I headed back home after Lincoln, and we were kind of buying and leasing a number of farms with our family business, growing from about 400 cows up to about 2,000 cows, and everything that came with that. For a while there, I ran out our 900 cow operation, which interestingly turned from a dairy farmer to people manager. Something that they didn't teach us so much about at Lincoln at the time, and the challenges that came with that. Since then, my wife and I broke away, and we brought our own farm. Have been on that for 10 years. Really interestingly, completely changed our model of managing people. I don't hide away from the fact that I was a bit of a slave driver, really. I hired people as sheep, so I couldn't work them as long as I could those hours that I hired them for, and that's just what I was doing. I turned them over every 6 months, and I got sick of hearing the stories that you guys came in, because the same stories, and just got sick of it. And it's a terrible cycle that we New Zealand farmers are in, and we need to get more out of it. Since taking on our farm and up to a few of the mental health challenges I've had, it's kind of opened my eyes, I guess, to a different side of things. Our employee at the moment, being with us today, is a completely different view on how to work with someone, how to give them a beneficial relationship within our farming business, and what that looks like. So that's been quite a journey. And in the same time, I was a member of the primary ITO Dairy IPG for quite a few years during my younger leadership years there, which was a bit of an eye-opener to the sector and what was going on in there, and that kind of moved on into the ITO stakeholder council as well, seeing what was going on in that space. So I picked up a little bit of knowledge in that space at the time, working through there. And then, as I mentioned, I was a proud dippy, graduating in 2003. So the workforce challenge, I guess, I'll put the question to you, Lulu, is what is the challenge? And it's good because I think we've now got an organisation, which I think Jeremy runs, that is really just working on this. What is the challenge of what we're dealing with? I spent 6 years on the IPG banging my head on the wall because we were trying to build a business around something that we didn't know. So how many managers how many dairy farm managers did we need? How many farm assistants did we need? When we were training 200, did we need 200, or did we actually need 1,000? We're so far off the mark that we didn't know. We also had, within the ITO, we had around 48% were migrant workforce in the dairy sector, and around 70% of those left after 3 years. So we were training, half of our workforce was being trained, and 70% of those were leaving, so 35% were leaving after 3 years. On top of that, they had the highest completion rates, but the other 50% had terrible completion rates of people, so they weren't actually finishing. So when you drill down into all of those numbers and all of the work that went in and everything into that vocational training space, I would struggle to suggest that we were achieving anything at all, particularly when the ones or the better ones that were coming through were probably going to naturally do that themselves. So that was a real challenge for me, and it certainly stuck with me all the way through. I sat through the road review and was challenged by that. I struggled with centralisation of it, mainly from the point of view that I thought in 15 years' time we'll be back to where we were. I think what are we going to be back there in 3 or 4? I think by the looks of it now. So I felt like in every meeting you were going to, you're wasting time because you were just building a ship that was coming back to none. On top of that, I was Lincoln educated. So he was a Lincoln guy trying to build a system for an ITO system that was different and ran differently. Also, something else I'd add to there, just in terms of the system, I felt what I was learning at Lincoln at the time was practical. It matched where we were as a farming nation and everything. In 2022, a dairy assistant on an ICO course was still printing off a photo, pasting it into a book and sending it in to be marked by their assessor. In 2022, that's insane. So there was a definite mile behind the times, and there's definite there needed to be a definite shake-up of what was going on. So I guess that is my first point I'll bring up, and I'm keen to discuss this later again. Is what is the challenge, and Jeremy, you and the team may have some thoughts on that. Is exactly what is the bricks of where we're sitting. Some of the Lincoln team may know in terms of who we're training here as well, of what we do. Are we actually keeping up, and where will we end up maybe in 5 or decades at a time? Obviously, kind of 2 different sectors, the sheep beef sector and the dairy sector, which I'll touch on there, slightly different within the own space. Sheep beef struggle with the farm ownership space. Our sheep beef properties, particularly with ES pricing and everything else going on, we're really struggling to get new farm owners to come into that space. And so what does that look like going forward? Elevating the level of the farm manager and what a farm manager actually is, on a sheep beef property, and particularly a large scale sheep beef property. Are they actually, what we used to consider the farm owners to be? Are they a lifer that will actually look after that property now for life? And they will actually have a generational aspect to them. And how do we build that up? Again, being a big picture guy and not a details type guy, I remember, trawling through the work around defining what a farm assistant was and a 2IC was and a farm manager was, not realising kind of the importance of actually that clarity does give real clarity around who you are and where you stand within the system, particularly in the dairy sector. And when I talk to sheep beef farmers, certainly that's something that they're keen to move more into around this farm manager space, and then we move that up. And again, I kind of look at the farmer who a farm manager is within the sheep beef sector. Obviously, we've got issues around remuneration and isolation. Typically, you're not doing this job for the remuneration isolation. There are other aspects that come with it, and that's a big part of why they do what they do. And so we've got to be careful that as the sector moves into its new phase, that we don't lose exactly what that is. And finally, one thing though that we are finding that they do pretty well within the shepherd sector is the pastoral care. They're looking after their shepherds, looking after their young people on farm in particular, and bringing them through the system to get further along to where they go. So that is a real positive. If we counter that to the dairy situation, when we move into a high turnover space and a higher migrant workforce dependency, and it's quite a different scenario. I mean, a lot of transient workers, a lot of shifting around, very much seasonal. And I don't know if the numbers have changed during it may be able to tell us this, but when I was at our ITO, 70%, I think was the number that rolled over every 2 years. Like, that is absolutely insane to be replacing 70% of your herd every 2 years. Or training, putting all this effort and training into 70% of your workforce that is going to leave. Again, when I go back to that earlier question, what are we doing with it? So it's one of the first questions that that we need to really ask and answer for the sector. Obviously, what dairy does have going for it though is the good career pathways. So relatively simple to work your way through the system, relatively clear pathway around where you want to go, whether it be through management, whether it be through lower order shear milking, and then still some really viable options to get into farm ownership as well. And a lot of that is obviously coming from the area, and the opportunities are still out there. I did get a few numbers from the ITO currently just at the moment as well, and you can see this is the sheep and beef sector here. Sorry, around how some of the training numbers have moved and evolved over the last 6 or 7 years. Obviously, we had COVID in there, we had free fees in there as well, and things moving around. But the dairy one you see is dairy here is quite more significant, a significant shift in terms of where the numbers are moving to. I understand it's probably a little bit different where Lincoln are sitting around. My understanding goes that you guys are on the upward trend, which is great. So, but that one big orange line there, the full length qualifications are a topic we'll touch on in a minute. But this, the move into more micro credentials and more of a learning structure that way is something that's really coming on. And so I have to go to here we go. That's good. Good start. I have to go to another conference and say we need to attract more people into the sector. I'm honestly going to put pins in my eyes, I swear, because we do not. Like I said, we have no problem bringing young people into the sector. All of our school programs are grossly over capacity. More people want to do it than don't. We just really don't have a problem. Our problem, and I'll talk about it particularly from a dairy point of view, is we bring them in and after 2 years we split 70% of them out. I mean, it's absolutely insane. I'll say it over and over again. So our issue is more protection and what we can do in that space, and there's been a fair bit of really good work going on there, but it's still such a massive way to go, and we could have a bit of a discussion around how we get there. I know you guys do a lot of your and others around how they're achieving that. I have done some work in this space and put a fair bit of thought into it at one stage, working with MBIE to design quite a significant program around this. As I touched on earlier, it's around our pastoral care and how we get our newbies, our young farmers, or just not be young, but those people that are new to the industry. For me, it's how we get them through the first 2 springs, the first 2 tough periods. Right? It's one reason the first spring is tough enough. I mean, and there's no hiding it. Everyone thinks it's like the army of the Navy SEALs, whatever, you've got to grind them down to make them learn. I don't know if that's the case anymore, and it's definitely not paying off. If we can get them through the first spring, if you can get them through the first spring and get them to understanding of what they're doing and enjoying it, obviously drag them around through the full season, and then bring them back through the next spring, where hopefully they enjoy it a bit more. They realise, hey, this is a bit easier than the last spring. I understand that I need to hang my raincoat out every night to let it dry out. I understand the importance of eating well. I understand the importance of going to bed at 8:30 rather than 11:30 after game for 3 hours and this sort of thing. It sounds really basic, but it's like I say, it's critically important, because otherwise, again, we spend a lot of money and a lot of effort in the sector, training, looking after, nurturing people that ultimately don't come through. talk about wrapping our new farmers in cotton wool. That's how I look at it. There's a real cost to that, but the cost on the other side is actually significantly greater if we don't. There's a real opportunity with it as well, because more if we have more of a specialised program within this space, we could ultimately it helps train the employers at the same time, because like I said, I was in that flash, and I needed some training myself, and sometimes it just takes a bit of looking over the fence to see what someone else is doing to realise that you can change your game and just make some pretty small tweaks to make a big difference. I'll touch on those quickly because it is important. I just done my brief, but so we changed from a salary position to an hourly position. I'm a Dutchman, a real tight ass on my phone, right? The idea of paying someone an hourly rate scared the hell out of me. I thought, they'll milk that pool over. They're going to slow as they can to get as many hours as they can, and that's how it works. It turns out it's the complete opposite. No, they want to get home just as quick as they can, but they also want to be paid and really value for the hours that they're doing. And when you do that, I've typically found that I've actually ended up paying less than what I would have if I paid on salary. On top of that, I'm not keeping someone around and giving them a job that actually costs me money to have them to. And so I'm not getting double hit by their wage and their hourly rate as well. And then to add to that, just recognising that a school assembly is really important. Dropping kids at school on the first day of the term is really important. Make sure they've got time with their family, on the weekends or whenever it is, and everything else. These small things which I think sometimes, I was an early farmer, I definitely took it for granted. How easy I could just sit back and do that sort of thing. Whereas an employee. So the changing the way that we look at it, but also putting that in a model that could be easily understood. So farmers are looking at purely from a financial point of view, which I was. You see, actually, no, it stacks up far better that way to be doing it. Obviously, we are seeing changes too in the workplace environment. I probably don't need to preach because we probably talk about this as well, that we have seen significant changes and people's expectations have changed to what they are. Also, the workplace environment has changed. We are not milking 220 cows now. That was started at 6 and finished at 8. And go back in the afternoon at 3 and finish at 5. We've got a big farm. We're milking from 5 or 4:30 in the morning through till 9. Enormous amounts of jobs to do as well, and then we're going from 1 to 5 and finishing up. It's quite different. That has a big impact on our rugby clubs, on our netball clubs, on kids' sport, on everything else that comes with it. On top of that, she's on 40 and there's only so many hours I can do at a 50-hour ratio, right? Like they are. It is a tough gig. You've got to be an athlete, or more of an athlete than what we used to be, and certainly more than what I was in my Harry Boat shed. So the environment has changed, and again, as employees, we've got to be flexible to. And saying that, it goes both ways, and how do we create the understanding that this is the situation you're in, but you are moving through a system where hopefully you're not getting abused, but you're moving to a place where you work through, you're actually learning as you go, and you're going to move from here to here at the time, and that comes from wrapping that problem around having a clear understanding of the direction of travel and goals and aspirations moving forward. Again, I touched on it. It's not only just about the financial reward, but also the emotional reward, and that seems to have lifted a lot more, particularly with the younger generation. Doing things for a purpose. I touched on earlier about being proud of what we do and the way we farm, and as I put on the bottom point there, making it Instagrammable, right? If you can't put it on Instagram, are you proud of your workplace? No. Are you proud of what you do? And that's what they want to do. They want to be able to show their friends that this is what we've done, this is our farm, we're really proud of it, and this is where I work, that's good result for everyone. Okay. That's actually it for me. I'm keeping it relatively short and simple because I did really want to taste through it a bit with you as well. Yeah, it's an interesting space and one I challenge. Obviously, we get asked, particularly a lot around funding. Can you advocate for more funding? But if we're not fixing the core problem, it's really hard to keep funding something that's continually broken. So that is a challenge going forward. I'd love to hear some of people's thoughts and maybe just open up questions. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. Join me. Wayne's left more than sufficient time for questions, but rather than questions, it sounds like you actually want a dialogue.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
open it up to the floor. Maybe you want to kick it off with.
I'll start with Jane. Jane,
Yeah.
Jane, obviously saying a lot of this within Derek Holding. And maybe talk about some of the things you've done, Derek Holding.
I really appreciate it. I was thinking, how am I going to possibly pass this? Yeah, I think a really key component for us. So I've been at Dairy Holdings for 5 years now. So I'm people and culture officer. So I do safety and HR at Dairy Holdings. And I think that a couple of two elements that kind of spring to mind around things we've been working on. And one of them really ties in with the multicultural piece. So in terms of our workforce, 50 to 60% of those people will identify as New Zealand European or Pakeha. The other 40 to 50% would be Filipino, Sri Lankan or Indian. And then there's some other South American in there as well. Quite a multicultural thing. And with that, I think comes a real challenge around that speaking up piece for a worker and a team. And I think, it really ties in with what you talked about in terms of the employer's role around fostering that culture, that it's a safe space for them to feel like they can speak up so that they can tell you if there's an assembly they want to go to or if there's something wrong about. So that's something that we've been focusing a lot on in the last few years, actually giving people a voice. I think that's really important for our workforce. I think that, and it also ties in quite heavily on our focus around safety of our people and promoting everyone getting home safe well at the end of the day. The other thing that comes to mind from your slide we've been challenging around is that training piece. We had a real challenge when government policy changed around our migrant workers and their access to primary ITO funding. The cost of doing milk quality or dealing with people were kind of key forces for us. Overnight went to a really unattainable cost, and that really impacted our ability to put people through those micro credentials. And then the full course as well. And so I think that in terms of that orange line and that blue line you put on your graph, I think that's a real impact for us. Really hindered our ability to access this formal training as opposed to on-the-job training. So we've been trying to remedy that, but it's not been easy over the last 18 months. I think some light there. So I think, probably just two things that come to mind that we've been focusing on. Is those two things really in terms of
Very good. Last week. Dairy Holdings. Dairy Holdings are being tighter than mine. How do you deal with that? How do you get it across the team?
I probably recategorize your wording and say, instead of being tight, that we just prioritize our spending where there's reasonable and return. I think when it comes from the people space, so we spend a lot of time working with Kiribati and John Redcraft from Rural Coverage. We've given 3 states that all of our people get things. And then that's a really good check and balance, I guess, around we're aiming to be an employer of choice. It's good to have an external barometer in terms of what we're doing. it's a really good way for us to get that. Training is really prioritised. Not a cost, it's investment in our people. Echo though that the industry that's difficult, you turn 70% over the moment in 2 years. That those people leaving in their first year out of our industry, I agree with you, it's just become fine. But I wouldn't, yeah, I think that it takes a lot of investment from our people, both in terms of time and training. So I think it's just it's part of becoming an employer of choice and leading in that, leading in the people space.
Yeah, how about like obviously I'm assuming the course has changed a bit in 20 years since I was here with Mark Campbell and Russell Pym back in the day.
Well, it's still first principle based, still pharmacist based, still science based. We'll probably be more finance than we used to. Today we had a well-being and mental health and agriculture lecture that we did look at my time. Health and safety was quite big on, trying to stop some of the squat deaths. So we're probably doing more of those sort of soft skills, people management skills, probably more trying to create more well-rounded individuals can provide email, like that, copy, consistent ways to get some of those soft skills, but it's still very much systems based.
Yeah.
They probably students probably have quite an expectation of doing a good job making progress. They would probably do something like that.
I think you brought up some points there around the emails and I think when I talk about partial care, that's what I'm really teasing into it. But well, it's some of the real basics of moving on to a farm, making sure you know they've got all the gear, they've got walking after sense of working, tearing, moving with the power and all the little things. How do we ensure that they're looked after? So effectively they've got no excuses to leave. Would be my way of looking at it. And when you drill down the cost of doing that, actually quite reasonable. Yeah.
So you talk sort of ideas could you bring to us that can do to address skills of skills.
Yeah, well, that's a challenging one, right? Because again, the attraction, the knowledge, so the attraction of coming to Lincoln, and wanting to be a farmer, so effectively they come to Lincoln first, and then getting out the workforce there. So there's probably some work there around practicalities of what they're going to get when they get on the farm or get into their roles, which sounds like there's a little bit of work going on in that space already. So that effectively it's not too much of a shock to the system. Typically, I would encourage generalisation, but the people coming out of London are more geared to handle that better. And so I hope that must something it's very good. It'd be interesting to see some of that. Anyone else can answer that? Yeah.
Callum and I were having a conversation about it the other day. So I got to hospital fast. Callum and I were having a conversation about it the other day. We're having a conversation exactly about that actually around if I'm gonna keep trying to think about the answer. That's why our conversation was the question we posed was around as more technology comes into the dairy sector in particular, obviously because that's our world. Is that going to create a change of skill set? So, if I fast forward 10 years, 5, 10 years time, who knows how long it's going to be. And I've got a herd manager who has been in a halter-based farm with all the technology in the shed, all of the information, heat detection all done through collars or AI. And they come to my farm and dairy holdings, we tend to keep to the basics around the way we farm. That's a gap, right? Because that worker who's been really used to that technology and the AI and whatever that looks like, now probably can't use tailpain to detect and struggle with pasture management. So we were having a conversation around, does this mean that we're going to see two different pathways in terms of our skill level, and whether it's sheep and beef or dairy? And that's, I guess, a bit of a challenge for us to think about in the future.
Not necessarily bad, it's just a transition, this transition period.
But there's going to be that transition period where I think you have some of the farmers that here today are not going to have to move as quickly with technology as some of our younger people that come in that are really embracing it.
That would be close to 10 years, we get expectation that farms would have some level of technology, the adoption of alternate. So there is 20% down and 20% wearables. 10 years time, it's going to be 80%. And the way it's getting. That's
So that's a challenge, right, for our workforce.
Yeah.
As we transition through in terms of moving in some cases at that speed, but that's quite quickly. Think about where you're coming from in terms of how quickly that's going to perhaps change in the next 10 years. That's the challenge, I think.
If you think about ITO, I guess like where that training coming from, we're going to use those tools.
We must be here.
Okay, you have that, Jared.
I mean, so to really I'm sure that second of the time with the workforce development council for the private sector. So our job is one sense to think about that, which is still needs of the sector. Just and this, as you also probably know, get another set of reforms around how we're going to arrange our training. And in fact, the government's touch and separate place, the new entity is going to have to work over a 2-year period to work out how much training work. I think that could be a really good thing because it's been very clear that the system hasn't been working very well for the business. Some rules like not having funding for microgrids, not helps. But there are a whole bunch of other groups that have ended up in the last 10 years that are just increasingly made it more and more not flexible. You guys actually, I think, you need to see your own rules of what the vocational system doesn't like and maybe keep control of what we're doing. So I personally think a whole lot of rules have been done. And industry needs to help decide what kind of training delivery models it wants. And you can really research about that.
So just whatever they could to make it work, and also the rare migrant workers, because they knew that if they had training, they're more likely to get the visa as previous. So that's why we had such a high number of migrant workers. Space. Yeah, a lot of things that like that will make a difference. I know I touched on. So I touched on around the whole paper-based thing there in 2022, which blew my mind. And I mean, at the same time, I was working with old Tangaroa Walker down south with this farm below. And I kept saying to him, like, can't be far away in Tangaroa from like a hologram, for example, so that he's standing right there next to you. Hey, this is how you tie a fence. It's not when you're fencing. To your question, that's where I think a lot of it going so close. Yeah, that in 10 years' time, it's not going to know. Right, like, yeah, going to be looking back.
And this is like the best assessment device on the lake, right?
Yeah.
Take a picture of somebody doing the act, ask them a question of why you're doing it, explain it, send the evidence. Right, why are we still doing paper-based assessment?
Issue would be thrown seeing you. Especially when you throw in the literacy, you research
I didn't even touch on that,
stuff
sorry.
about, especially in English speaking language, but also stuff about like the average reading age is something like 7 or 8 in terms of like comprehension. Sort of thing.
So I talk about 48% being migrant workers of the 50% of the New Zealand workers. I think, the number of, 50% of those New Zealand workers here on literate. Yeah. And again, the system was designed around writing reports, writing, this sort of thing. And I think that's fair, that's where Taylor and I actually jumped into the space. And it was, hey, just watch a video, move, seeing, I find it fascinating that you couldn't read it right and how really
Well, thank you very much for your talk. You've sort of danced around it, and this conversation seems to be kind of getting in that direction, but I'm still really curious what your thoughts are on why your retention is so bad. Like, what is it that's putting people off? You've touched on resilience and maybe expectations of a job that's going to give them more acceleration early in the piece, but you're losing a lot of people. And you guys must have some ideas about why. And I guess where I'm going is, what is there something that we can do on an educational side of things that we could even at least play with to see if some of your ideas around where they go is valid? Or
So Jane will be an experience in the winter this winter. In a couple of weeks, it put a snow out here on the ground. Head out to the cow paddock. But you've got to wear your raincoat. It was wet yesterday. And your gumboots that were wet yesterday. And be standing out in the cow paddock. You've still got 4 hours to go shifting fences in the cows. And you're going to go home and you're not going to, or you're going to have a fire to heat your house, but the fire's not going to be going. It's an old house, it's cold, and you've only got that's all of these multiple factors adding. And it's not that it wouldn't be a Derek Holdings farm, but it would be another one.
Our house is a point slim.
But what I'm saying is, if you can see where I'm going, so we do portray a really good image of the sector. Like, it is a lot of fun, but there is also some really shitty times as well. And that's, I guess that's what I'm saying around how do we, mollycoddle them through the first 15 months or so. It's because you come out the other side and you realise, oh, this is what I learned in the rain, or this is what I learned in the mud, and not every day is a winner. But and I still will, I hate going out in the rain, but when I'm out in the rain, they're the days that I love the most, on the farm. So, and you slowly learn that over time. Yeah.
We also start people. I've been in the industry for 10 years now, and I've always thought the 1st of June is a really terrible time, right? For someone to come and start a job in the dairy industry, because you literally start off in the first day of winter, and your first 3 months experience is in Canterbury is cold and snow and much, and then we expect you to love it because it gets better. And so you're right.
You don't know the farm, you don't know the system.
You don't know the system, you don't know the farm, and you literally turn up. Like, if you turn up in February, oh, lovely. Sun's out, beautiful mountains, it's dry. Like, first of June is a really challenging time to start someone in the industry, right? So I think, Wayne's right around it. You can get them through that first year and get them into the second year. The retention, could be the chance for that first 3 to 6 months. During December can be quite challenging, I think.
Sorry, Charlie. Well, yeah, immigrant communities, are they with families or are they single people?
A bit of both. And to be frank, I don't think a lot of our employers, I'm going to talk about the Wayne of old today. The Wayne of old probably didn't fully appreciate that man has left his family behind to travel halfway around the world. Like, I've met some Filipinos with COVID. I met some Filipinos who had left their kids when they were 2 or 3. Didn't see them again until they were like, as a parent, just sit with them. That's hard. And I don't think the Wayne of old probably would have appreciated that. So some of them come here just simply just thought they had you back home. I think this slowly, the residency fees that was issued in 2021, I think helped a lot of them bring in families. Now we have a bunch.
I was talking to an Australian chap who's got a private training cat. Part of the motivation for that is the isolation of their farms. They have human farms. Why? Speak English. And the ultimate is mobility. I found that once the family have mobility, it's easier for them to stay. Don't think that's such a big
Remember the wine involved too was 26 to 30. Young and dumb, get about cows and milk and money, going hard,
It's okay.
you know, and that sort of thing. And again, it's just trying to work the systems to, you know, and that's also what we see like with the sector. Is particularly the dairy sector, it's relatively easy. You housing for us, you move up the ranks pretty, but it's tricky to learn those people skills. But it's also tricky to understand the family dynamic and that sort of thing. When maybe you're not even there yet at your stage of life, right? So how do we you can bring that support in to have a better understanding?
So he asks, how do you get employees involved in this? Because everything from daily realities to shaping, so that it's not so much just driven.
Yeah, so I think the sector has got some work to do, whether it be dairy and seeds, which you're having, some of the here, and around creating this thing. I thought, for example, for a woman is struggling massively at the moment, and it's a huge space sake that there's huge space within her communities. Not to do the whole thing, but to be much more heavily involved in. So it'll take a big effort to make it happen, but the results will be so evident so quickly because the numbers currently are so bad that I think it would actually change relatively quickly. It's just a matter of actually picking them. Yeah, that's one of the. Just wanted to do things there, but we got pretty close to the years ago, but it's just it needs some funding really and sector really needs to probably get in behind. It's another good question around in this space. Should there be a levy on training? We've got a small number of farms doing a significant amount of training for the whole sector, and they do that at their own cost. Actually, to work, for other reasons as well. But should there actually be a levy within the sector to help to manage that process and to bring more people through and ultimately, improve the whole skill set of the sector. Once we get the numbers right, like once we get a balance back out, then we can start doing stuff, and really improve on what we're doing. But at the moment, we're just so far out of the way that it's
Yes. Discussing.
I think it's probably a bit bigger than that. Yeah, and it is a bit of a case by case basis. It's could be involved with it, but again, it's like it's more pulling together of quite a few groups within the sector to really make it happen.
Join me in thanking Wayne once again. Wonderful talk and wonderful time. It's such a proud alumni. We want to make sure we well branded. I'd like it for those. Thank you very much, Wayne. Very much appreciated the discussion and again, And thank you as an audience for engaging so well with the message and the story. I think for us at Lincoln, a lot to reflect on in terms of the path forward. So thank you again.